Hello everybody, today I want to talk about owning and running shops in Albion Online. Since I'm looking at doing this a bit more, the YouTube and the Twitch content over the next few weeks and maybe month, I thought it would be interesting for some of you if I share my experience and my thoughts around what it's like to buy and run shops in Albion. First, let me explain very briefly the specific situation and circumstances. Then I will give you the TLDR. Was it worth it? I will share some numbers and assumptions, and then in the second half of the video, I will explain how these numbers, I assume, will impact the overall picture. All right, let's get started. Here is my 1 month experience of running and owning shops in Albion Online. First, unfortunately, I have to give a whole bunch of context because, as always, in a dynamic game like Albion, where prices are not static, events are not static, player activity is not static, as well as a whole bunch of other things that can and will be different for you at the time, this is just important. I can only offer insight into my experience, and if you don't know why I made certain decisions that are absolutely based on my own situation, then you cannot make good decisions later if your own set of circumstances is different. I've been playing Albion for 8 years now, and because of that, I have access to a vast amount of advanced options not everyone does. My main character has cooking, for example, fully maxed out, and I do have the option to activate multiple alt characters if I wanted to. Also have cooking and crafting and refining and all sorts of stuff maxed out. This is very different from most players in Albion. My motivation and enjoyment of Albion comes mostly from interacting with this huge simulated economy and the world of Albion. And the satisfaction and enjoyment I might get from seeing number go up on my screen is maybe different to you, especially if you are more into the competitive PvP side of the spectrum. So, what did I do then? Last auction cycle, 30 days ago, I bid on and bought plots in Fort Sterling. 14 in total, 10 individual and 1 so-called 4 plot. The choice of the city does matter a little bit for this specific case because we end up using very simple recipes for our food, but in general this applies to all of Albion and the shop game. I wanted to keep things simple in the beginning since I just really started getting back into Albion, and handling 8 different foods for 8 different buildings gets complex and overwhelming very, very fast. So what did I spend on these plots, and did they end up making me money? Short answer, more than I could have, and no. I lost silver putting everything together if you tally it after 30 days. But I will say this, in terms of feeling like, was it worth my time? I would say yes, but only if you, or rather if I talk myself into that, because I have this quality where I am not quite happy if I realize I wasted silver or I am not doing as effectively as I could have. So with the option of 14 different plots, what did I do? Build in terms of buildings. Quick reminder, I wanted low complexity for the beginning, so I opted for the local refining building, lumber mills in Fort Sterling, many of them. Now, these are notoriously hard to make a profit on, especially because the competition is crazy. The prices of their favorite food of the buildings, carrot soup, is the first and easiest food to make in the game, and plenty of people sell carrots and carrot soup at a loss because they are leveling or for whatever reason, and that drives prices and cost quite down by a lot. When I bid on the plots in Fort Sterling last month, I made sure I bid on a lot of plots. Because I wanted my Albion Journal economy achievement that needs me collecting 1 billion silver from buildings. So I wanted to get this done as fast as I could. And from my experience, I knew that I would likely need like 5 to 10 buildings running at good usage to get this done in a month or 2. Also, I wanted to test a few things that I will share later that I thought at the time might boost revenue. So I ended up getting 14 plots, 11 total, 1 4 plot, and that unfortunately kind of told me that I ended up bidding a bit too high on them potentially. I was able to splurge there. I initially talked myself into being fine with bidding high since the new update Abyssal Depths was about to come out, and I assumed competition would be higher and I might be able to sell them off for a small profit if I got too many plots. That actually turned out to be the case. So I sat there and thought, oh damn, 14, what do I do with these? I can handle maybe 5 or 10. So I immediately went around and turned around and said, all right, I'll just list them again for like 20 million more for about what I bought them for. So in case someone wanted to shop for plots, they would have the option to buy it from me, and I might just turn a profit immediately. And which is the more important thing, actually reduce my complexity because I don't need to deal with even more plots than 10. So on the 4 plots that I wanted to flip, and get rid of, I built mills, tier 3. So the cost of the building on these is actually like what, 250k or so. And these mills, after feeding daily, were actually turning a profit. Their capacity was getting used and they generated about 500k silver a day of profit after food. I had them for about 2 weeks, the mills, before they eventually sold. I was reducing the price daily. And with the 7 million profit of the food and the reduction in price that I think I went like 4 or 5 million below what I paid for the plots, I essentially turned break even on these, which, you know, in hindsight, it make me quite happy. All right, a pro tip, by the way, if your business model for some reason is flipping plots, so say you go around the various cities and you try to bid or snipe some plots that look attractive or that look like the owner might be AFK or whatever. Some people even do that with, you know, a war chest of, you know, 5-10 billion silver, and they bid on essentially every possible plot in a city with the purpose of relisting and flipping. You could and maybe should run tier 3 not lumber mills, normal mills for making wheat on them. So they even generate a little bit. It's an extremely low cost of investment there. Anyways, one of the plots I had already bought had 4 butchers on them, so I thought I'll just keep these. I don't need to make the buildings new, and I would be able to compare some of the values from the butchers to the lumber mills I was going to place on the rest of it. One of the plots also had a cook, so I was going to make my own food since I correctly assumed that only if you end up making or transporting your own food, this whole endeavor will be close to even be worth it. On the rest of the plots, as I said, I just put lumber mills, but with one thing to note. I did not upgrade all of the buildings to tier 8. Since I was going to have so many on my own, I'm essentially just competing with myself. And for the few players who actually refined tier 8 wood, there would be plenty of options close by. So looking back at the performance then of the tier 7 and tier 8 lumber mills, the revenue, the daily revenue, is almost equal. It was very little in terms of difference and in terms of revenue. This is actually a big thing if you think it through, because the savings that you have from a tier 7 versus a tier 8 building is 150 tier 8 stone blocks, which are what, like 27k silver, and that times 4 is like 15-16 million silver in savings right there and then. Anyway, the other thing I knew was that carrot prices and carrot soup would be higher in Fort Sterling compared to Limhurst, which is right next door. So over the course of the 30 days, the price difference of carrots bought in Limhurst to carrots bought in Fort Sterling was some days around 100 silver per carrot. Most days more in the 50 to 70 silver per carrot range. Long story short, if you math it out, if you buy carrot soup or carrots in Limhurst, turn them into carrot soup, move them over, you end up with a price per nutrition, which is what you see on the buildings if you hover over them, as a fee on the buildings in the city of around 250 to 280, depending on how you calculate, how you shift around the numbers, how much you know, value certain things, and so on and so forth. I won't go into the super nitty gritty here, but I will say this. You need to math this out properly. Otherwise, you don't know what the F you are doing, and you will absolutely lose money guaranteed. So if you are lazy and don't want to do math, do not do shops in Albion. Yeah. Anyways, so making and buying carrot soups cost me, as I said, around 250. The competition at the time was such that either you put your lumber mill fee at 300 or you get zero revenue in the location I purchased, which was far south of the city center. I tried various things to enhance the attractiveness of my southern location there. I set high rewards and high fees. I even went extremely crazy and even set a 950 silver reward, which if you would buy a carrot soup from the city, deliver it to my building, you would get 3 times the price immediately back. But that had to come with 1,000 fee, and that didn't work. Nobody was doing that. Even if they, technically could bring their own food, get a cheaper rate, and yeah, it didn't work. I tried various prices, various price levels versus fees and rewards and so on, but none of that numbers game actually worked to attract business. People didn't want to bring their own food. They don't care. The only thing that worked was appealing to gamer logic. Lowest number is good. I want to emphasize this because it's so different to real life. For example, people in games will literally spend 15 more minutes if they can have a 299 fee instead of a 300 fee for the same thing they're doing. That's like 0.00 something savings. But because of gamer logic, that equals quote unquote winning at the game. So 15 minutes of walk time is never, ever worth 1 silver difference for crafting, but people don't care. Gamers don't care. Lowest number equals good. All right. So the only consistent way I was able to get revenue on buildings was to be the cheapest fee place in town. It's just how Albion buildings work currently, and especially if you rely on public foot traffic for that revenue. So what does all of this look at a daily basis then? Well, you put like 5 stacks of carrot soup into a lumber mill at a cost of 250. And over the course of the day, people come to your building and make planks, and then you run out of food and you have to fill it up again. They sell or they pay a fee of like 300 for it. I tried 310, 333, and so on. But for the purpose of this video and this recording, I will just assume we did 250 buy, 300 sell. So that's about a 17% margin. And the daily revenue per lumber mill was about 2.5 million on average across the 8 different ones that I had. I should note here that I only fed the lumber mills once per day in the mornings, and they would usually be out of food within the 24 hours. So in terms of efficiency, you can assume a bit higher revenue if you feed twice per day, or even better, if you feed before and after prime time. All right, so if you take 17% out of 2.5 million revenue, that's about 425K quote unquote profit per day per plot. However, here you are not including the cost of stone blocks yet. You're not valuing your own time. And most importantly, you're not including your monthly cost to bid on a plot. So if we extrapolate that to 28 days, let's assume you miss a day or two because it's your grandmother's birthday or whatever, then you end up with 28 times 425K is roughly about 12 million silver. Let's call it quote unquote profit. But again, you're not valuing the time and stone and so on. So this is already extremely tight in terms of margin, because the bids on or the cost to get a plot is, depending on what it is, like 30 to 50, and then inner ring is like, or city center is like crazy different. But outside, the bids are somewhere around that range. And then if you consider that defending a plot counts double, then you're with what the prices are, like 30, 40, 20 mil ish. Yeah. Yep. All right. So you're asking, well, if 12 million is less than like 30, 40 it costs to buy and hold a plot or defend your plot, why are prices like that? And why do people even bother? All right, let me leave you with some pointers and ideas how players increase the value to them individually and how they make a profit, quote unquote, of a market situation like this. If I forget anything or if I didn't consider something, please write down in the comments below what you think is how people, quote unquote, actually, quote unquote, make money off this shop game. All right, so here are the reasons why I think prices like these can exist in the current game state of Albion. One, the most obvious, I think, is people don't know or people don't care. Some people just want to try, they don't want to spend the time mathing things out, and they just follow whatever they see from other shops. This paired with the competition and how competition and the race to the bottom way to compete with shops causes then extremely tight margins until the person who actually does the math gives up and says, all right, until here, no further. Point two is people can or want to afford a loss. Either to maybe make it seem unprofitable for the general public, maybe for some reason cyclic effects are happening. For example, a lumber activity event that made everybody a bunch of money can then result in lower costs later, or vice versa. People expect the lumber mill refining event to happen, so it somehow balances out in the numbers. Or maybe somebody who's overpaying or like a patch is happening. All right, and then if you calculate over months, it's a different numbers game than if you calculate month to month, where some buildings, they last, right? Your buildings take damage as time goes by, and if you can secure your plot, then you don't need to have the full stone cost every month, but then you have lower. There's a bunch of things that if you math it out over the long term, then it can make more sense. The other one is you can externalize or socialize the losses of that specific situation to maybe your guild or your friend group. So you can afford to subsidize and take advantage of others, or even take advantage of a group dynamic. So let's say your guild has 50 refiners who want to refine wood, and you have that social agreement to then overpay for food via guild service, or vice versa, underpay. You charge less because your guildmates and so on use some of the guild PvP silver or PvE silver to feed your stations, or you get donated food and so on. So there's a means to have a quote-unquote competitive advantage that way. By subsidizing and getting it from other sources, you can then afford to push down the fees on the buildings. And then there's one thing that is long-term planning or luck. For example, maybe you didn't play for 6 months or 2 years, and then for some odd reason you have like 50,000 carrot soups and 5,000 stone in your bank that you didn't even know existed, and how you got there, and maybe your previous guild master left them and you're like, oh, okay. And maybe you even just bought them like super cheap 5 years ago and they're being in your bank and you're like, okay, whatever, I'll just use it now. So maybe that's hard to sell otherwise, and you're just like, yeah, I want to try this, I need some points. Maybe you're wanting to turn these resources into Albion Journal unlocks, for example, maybe like me. There's a bunch of long-term effects or random effects there. And finally, there's other means to get resources for cheaper. We already talked about guild members selling stuff to you. Or maybe you even assume a different base cost. So if you buy something at like 50 silver, the assumption you make, yeah, this actually costs me like 40 silver. Let me explain it. So for example, if you want to level up something or progress your character, your journal or whatever, then you make a weird subconscious decision where you say, all right, as long as my losses don't exceed some arbitrary number, I'm happy to quote unquote lose some silver on it because it's progressing my character. That's a little bit weird to have to wrap your head around, but you know, some people are happy to quote unquote lose money or break even as long as they get fame or experience or fun or whatever. All right. A lot of Albion's economy works that way, by the way. Yeah, some things in Albion basically only even begin to make sense if you consider the fact that progressing your own character and getting unlocks or saving time has a silver value. All right, that is sort of my thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed me rambling about plots and buildings and sharing my numbers and this 1 month experience. I'll probably do a few more of these if you guys like them. Let me know what you think of this stream of thought that I just wrote down in like an hour. And if you want to chat about it, then I will be live streaming on Twitch and YouTube, and we can discuss things more there. If you're into that sort of thing, you can find the links in the description below. Yeah, and then one last shameless plug. I do need a guild that is active on the Americas server during EU mornings. Yeah, that's a big ask. 08 to 13 UTC. That's right around downtime, just before downtime, right after downtime. If you are in one of these guilds, I heard these might exist. Or if you know somebody who is playing during that time zone, please get in touch. I'm quite lonely doing, you know. Anyways, that is it for the video. Thank you for watching. See you around, and follow.